Hey guys, tonight we take a carriage ride back in time to the early 1800s. Fields of France rolling under your boots, the breeze crisp, and the sun tilting toward afternoon. You're with Napoleon Bonaparte himself, oddly cheerful for once, as he waves you toward a strange little celebration. There's food, drink, friends, and wait, crates, boxes twitching, fur poking out. Oh no. You've stumbled into what may be the most absurd battlefield in history. This is the true-ish story of the time Napoleon fought. A horde of bunnies. You probably won't survive this, or at least your dignity won't. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. It's always fun seeing where in the world you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You don't usually expect a military celebration to include hundreds of rabbits, swords, medals, fine wines, sure. But rabbits? It's the summer of 1807. You're just outside Paris, and the Napoleonic Wars have paused for breath. Napoleon has signed the Treaty of Tilsit, ending hostilities with Russia. He's just wrapped up one of his most significant campaigns. Spirits are high. And how does the most powerful man in Europe choose to celebrate? With a hunt. No, not a symbolic one or something involving his enemies. A literal rabbit hunt. You arrive by carriage with Napoleon's inner circle, generals, marshals, loyal bureaucrats. And there he is, the man himself, stepping out in a tailored blue coat, hands stuffed into his waistcoat like he's posing for a painting. His expression? Slightly smug. He's proud of this idea. We'll make a fine day of it. He tells you, simple pleasures, like old times. Sure, you think, why not? It's a sunny afternoon, the wine is flowing, and someone hands you a pistol polished to a shine. You even spot a few tables set with cheese and fruit. There's laughter, toasts. Everything feels normal. That doesn't last long. Off to one side, a few uniformed assistants are wheeling in carts, big wooden crates stacked high. You see one jiggle. A little black nose pokes out between slats. Ah, the rabbits. You chuckle. Napoleon claps his hands together and announces, "Release the game!" Here's the thing. Hunts like this were a common pastime among Europe's aristocrats. They'd typically release a few wild hares into an enclosed field or forest, giving guests the illusion of sport without too much actual difficulty. But someone on Napoleon's staff has misunderstood the assignment. Or maybe they were just too enthusiastic. Because when those crates pop open, the rabbits don't scatter, they charge. At first, it's funny. The first wave, maybe 24 rabbits, comes bounding toward you. You laugh. Look, they're coming to say hello. How quaint. But they don't stop. Behind them, another wave pours out. Then another. It's like a fur tide. Soft, fuzzy, and very determined. The laughter turns into confused glances. Then into shouts. The rabbits aren't frightened. They're eager. Like they're coming for the snacks or the shoes. Or maybe vengeance. Why are they coming this way? One officer yells, backing up. Napoleon steps forward, hands still in his coat, watching the growing bunnies swarm with a furrowed brow. He doesn't flinch at cannon fire. He's faced Cossacks in snow and British ships at sea. But this is new. They're just rabbits, he mutters. One leaps onto his boot. He kicks it off. Another clings to his trousers. By now, it's obvious. These are not wild hares. These are tame, farm-raised rabbits, used to being fed by humans. When they see all the glittering medals, fancy boots, and baskets of food, they assume it's lunchtime. The field is full of startled men, waving their hats, trying to escape. One general hops a fence. Another spills his champagne. You stand frozen. A rabbit nibbles the hem of your coat. Welcome to the only battle in history where your enemy wants head pats and possibly your sandwich. Some accounts estimate hundreds of rabbits were released. Others claim thousands. That part is a little fuzzy, pun intended. But the chaos? Absolutely real. And Napoleon? He backs up, swatting at furballs with his hat. Eventually, he shouts something urgent. Too urgent for a bunny hunt. His coachman gets the signal and scrambles to bring the imperial carriage around. You follow, dodging rabbits that seem increasingly aggressive, or maybe just very social. You help him into the carriage. One particularly bold bunny tries to hop in with you. Napoleon slams the door. The wheels spin. The Emperor of France, the conqueror of Europe, flees the battlefield. From rabbits. Let that sink in. You rattle down the path, watching from the window as dozens of tiny bodies bounce after you. It's like a surreal dream, if dreams came with buck teeth and twitchy noses. There's a thump on the roof. Probably a rabbit. Probably. No one speaks on the ride back. There's no protocol for this. Later, some say it was sabotage. Others claim it was a prank gone wrong. Maybe it was just a supplier who didn't read the memo. Historians still argue whether it was deliberate or just deeply French. You're just trying to pick rabbit fur out of your boots. The next morning, you wake in a tent just outside the encampment, sunlight pooling gently across your cot. Your boots are still damp from yesterday's retreat, and there's hay in your coat collar. A few generals shuffle by outside, pretending they're not whispering. You know exactly what they're whispering about. Everyone does, but no one dares say it aloud. Napoleon has banned the word lapin, French for rabbit, from camp conversation. For now, at least. And yet, the story won't stay buried. It started as a joke, a celebration, something small and simple after the long, grueling campaigns of Prussia and Austria. Napoleon, always chasing efficiency, had thought, why not combine relaxation and tradition? A rabbit hunt would be perfect, both refined and rustic. The perfect little breath of joy after months of blood, politics, and empire building. So he gave the order. And when Napoleon gave an order, no one questioned it. Least of all his personal secretary, Alexandre Berthier, who had been put in charge of the whole thing. A man with an eye for detail, Berthier set out to plan the perfect hunt. He selected the field, a rolling patch of countryside not far from the imperial court, with just enough trees to offer a challenge. Invitations were sent out. The guest list included marshals, aristocrats, and a few foreign dignitaries. Berthier had casks of wine delivered, fine breads, fresh fruit, and sparkling cutlery for the post-hunt meal. And, of course, the rabbits. Now, if you or I were planning a rabbit hunt, we might contact a gamekeeper or perhaps consult someone with, experience. But Berthier? He was efficient. He ordered several hundred rabbits from a nearby farm. Tame rabbits, domesticated ones, the kind bred to trust humans, or eat from their hands, or maybe cuddle up if they felt cold. He didn't ask how wild they were. He just asked how many they had. And the farmer delivered. Crates and crates of docile, fluffy, well-fed rabbits, carrots and cabbage nibblers, backyard lap pets. You lean against a tree and sip from your canteen as the memory replays in your head. The coach wheels spinning, Napoleon shouting, rabbits swarming like adorable missiles. You rub your temples. Sir, can I? You spin. It's a junior officer, barely more than a teenager, trying very hard to look like he didn't just snort with laughter. Yes? Orders from Marshal Lannes. He wants to discuss, a pause, yesterday's incident. You nod, trying not to groan. Everyone's calling it the incident now. As if saying rabbit might summon them again, like tiny, twitchy demons. Later that afternoon, you're sitting beside a war table. Not a real one, just a picnic bench someone dragged into a tent. Maps are spread out, but they're not of battlefields. They're blueprints of the event, where the crates were, where Napoleon stood. How the rabbits moved. It's like planning for war in reverse. I thought they'd scatter, someone mutters. They should have, says another. They didn't. You all fall silent. Finally, someone dares to ask, has he said anything? You all know who he is. No one answers, but you can guess. Napoleon rarely explains himself. He doesn't do reflection. He does conquest, strategy, vision. He's a man of enormous will and usually unbreakable composure. But yesterday, you saw something crack, just for a moment, in the twitch of a nose, the bounce of a puffball paw, the way he scrambled into his coach like the ground elf was betraying him. He wasn't humiliated by enemy fire, sabotage, or treason. He was humiliated by bunnies. Later that night, you find yourself walking the edge of the camp. Stars burn overhead, soft and cold. A breeze rustles the wheat. You hear something shift behind a log. You pause. A shape. Small, round, twitchy. Your muscles tense. But it's only a beetle. You laugh quietly and shake your head. You think about Napoleon again. How he was so determined to impress, to demonstrate that he could command anything, even a countryside afternoon. How he wanted to show that power wasn't always about cannons and conquest. Sometimes it could be soft, social, even fun. But control, it turns out, has limits. Especially when you introduce several hundred small mammals with absolutely no respect for human dignity. You return to camp and lie down on your cot. From the other tent, someone giggles. You know what they're thinking about. Tomorrow, Napoleon will move on. He always does. There are borders to redraw, ministers to argue with, new campaigns to plot. But the story will follow him like a tale. People will whisper it in kitchens. Soldiers will pass it around campfires. Historians still argue whether this story really happened as told, or whether it's a myth that bloomed over time like a dandelion fluff on the wind, shaped by jokes, stretched by disbelief. After all, the original documents are suspiciously vague. Some diaries mention a chaotic hunt, others are suspiciously silent. Even official biographers often skip over the incident like they're afraid of what it says. But you were there. You saw it. And you still have rabbit hair in your socks. The next few days pass quietly, too quietly. You sense a weird tension hovering over the camp, like everyone's waiting for Napoleon to explode. Or worse, make a joke. But he doesn't, not once. He returns to official duties almost immediately, holding briefings and walking maps with his generals as though nothing ever happened. And maybe that would work, if not for the snickers. Because the whispers are everywhere. You hear them from stable boys, from kitchen staff, from soldiers trying to look busy while doing nothing. One of the guards even tried to imitate a rabbit hop during drills. Big mistake. He was reassigned to latrine duty faster than you can say, carrot. Still, the story spreads like wildfire, and no matter how hard the high command tries to silence it, the details keep hopping along. Of course, it doesn't help that there are rumors of a portrait. Yes, a sketch one of the aides-de-camp supposedly drew during the chaos. It shows Napoleon mid-sprint, his coattails flying, a trail of bouncing bunnies in hot pursuit. You haven't seen it yourself, but apparently it's hilarious and wildly inaccurate, unless the emperor really did try to swat a rabbit with a baguette. So what did the picnic scene actually look like? Well, you remember the field clearly. A wide, open patch of grass dotted with fruit trees, soft hills rolling on either side, and a tented buffet that looked better suited to Versailles than a battlefield. Silk napkins, no joke. You remember the pop of the crates of crates opening, the strange silence just before the first rabbit bounced out, the sunlight glinting off a silver platter mirrored in a dozen beady eyes. At first, the field looked like paradise, a casual summer feast, golden pears, roasted quail, linen fluttering in the breeze, and then twitching chaos. Some of the guests had no idea how to react. One general tried to maintain his composure by calmly slicing brie while 4 rabbits clambered up his lap. Another retreated into the wine tent, only to discover it was full of even more rabbits, eating through the napkins. You tried to stay professional. Keyword, tried. At one point, you were locked in a weird tug-of-war with a rabbit over a croissant. The rabbit won. And the weirdest part? They weren't violent. They weren't biting or scratching. They were just assertive. Like tiny agents of destiny sent to remind France, and maybe all of Europe, that control is an illusion and lunch is sacred. Someone even said later that Napoleon had made eye contact with one particularly fat rabbit. Locked eyes. A full 5 seconds of understanding. And then the rabbit lunged. That may be an exaggeration, but hey, historians still argue whether any of it happened exactly this way. There's no official record in the military dispatches, no orders mentioning rabbits, not even in Berthier's usually meticulous notes. Suspicious, right? Some say the whole incident was invented by soldiers years later to poke fun at the emperor. Others claim it was covered up almost immediately, a campaign of silence waged by embarrassed aides who feared it would make Napoleon look weak. A few believe it was staged by a foreign spy. One Russian historian even insists the rabbits were trained as a psychological weapon. Yes, really. And yet, the core facts seem to hold. Crates of rabbits, a planned hunt, a shocking reversal of roles. Even stranger is what came afterward. Napoleon stopped holding celebratory hunts altogether. From that day forward, all future military victories were celebrated indoors, preferably with a ceiling, and no animals. You learn this firsthand when, 2 weeks later, after another diplomatic win, Napoleon calls for a private dinner instead of a hunt. Let's avoid the countryside, he says dryly. It's unpredictable. There's a pause. Then one of the marshals dares to say it. Your Majesty, perhaps we should make rabbit stew? Silence. You freeze. And then a smile. The faintest smirk on Napoleon's lips. Only if they're already cooked, he replies. Everyone exhales. The room bursts into relieved laughter. And just like that, the tension breaks. He doesn't talk about it again, but he doesn't forbid the jokes either. It's like the whole ordeal becomes an inside joke among the upper command, a shared, silent agreement that yes, this happened, and no, we will never explain it to outsiders. You, though, you keep replaying the scene in your head, the field, the startled generals, Napoleon running, then laughing. That moment, weirdly, made him human. Less the distant, mythic figure everyone feared, and more a real man, frustrated, embarrassed, and somehow kind of charming in defeat. And it's not like this was his only eccentric moment. Far from it. But we'll get to that. For now, the sun sets over the camp, casting a golden light on the canvas tents and clinking mess tins. You stretch your legs, brush some hay off your cot, and glance around just to be sure. No rabbits. You can sleep in peace, at least tonight. It starts with one. You see it while inspecting the edge of the camp. A lone rabbit perched in a wheat clump, its ears twitching with that unmistakable, overly confident bounce. You freeze. Is it a dream? A flashback? Or worse, has word gotten out that the Imperial picnic field is prime territory for snack acquisition? You blink. The rabbit vanishes into the tall grass. You rub your eyes and walk away quickly, boots crunching over dry earthland, the weight of potential absurdity already settling on your shoulders again, because now you can't stop thinking about them. That moment, the crates opened, and the soft puffball nightmare began. Most people have never seen a wave of fluffy chaos descend on a military gathering. You have. You still smell cabbage when no one's cooking, still hear the squeaky shuffle of determined little feet. And you remember it vividly because it was sudden, like the sky cracked open and poured bunnies. The release was supposed to be orderly. Assistants wheeled out the wooden cages and positioned them at strategic points around the field, like ammo caches in a war game. The idea was simple. When signaled, the doors would be unlatched, the rabbits would bolt for the brush, and the guests would hunt at leisure, sipping wine between pot shots. But the second the latches clicked, something shifted. Instead of racing away from the humans, the rabbits paused, sniffed, then turned toward the crowd as one. It was eerie, coordinated, like someone had trained them, or maybe the collective bunny brain had just collectively gone rogue. There's a sound to that moment you'll never forget, a soft, rapid thumping, multiplied by hundreds of paws hitting the ground in unison. At first, people thought it was adorable. Oh, they're coming toward us, someone giggled. Then came the realization. They weren't just approaching. They were advancing, at speed. Hold, one marshal barked, probably out of instinct. Too late. Rabbits surged like cottony torpedoes, darting between boots, scrambling over laps, and launching themselves onto plates of cheese. One climbed Napoleon's leg and attempted to scale his coat like a velvet cliff. He batted it away, but two more took its place. You were frozen, staring at a sea of quivering noses and beady eyes. A tiny white blur zipped past your leg. Then another. Then a dozen. Within seconds, the elegant picnic unraveled into chaos. One officer tried to shield the wine table by standing atop it. Bad idea. The table collapsed under his weight, launching bottles into the air like a tragic fireworks show. Another guest attempted to herd a cluster of rabbits with his hat, only to be overwhelmed. You briefly saw his face disappear beneath a tide of fluff before he resurfaced, gasping, hatless, and holding a radish. And Napoleon? He had tried to take command. Of course he did. He was Napoleon. Form a line, he shouted absurdly. But there was no line to form, no enemy to flank. These weren't trained soldiers. They were bunnies. Tireless, fast, and utterly indifferent to imperial protocol. They darted under tunics, into baskets, over boots, around sabers. Someone slipped on a banana tart. You're still not sure where the banana tart came from. You and Napoleon stood side by side for a brief, bizarre moment, he with his saber drawn, you with a breadstick, trying to maintain order as the world descended into squeaky madness. But the bunnies didn't back down. If anything, they seemed emboldened. A particularly plump brown rabbit made eye contact with Napoleon and let out a soft merp before lunging at a wheel of camembert. That was the final straw. "Get the coach," Napoleon barked. You remember pushing through the mayhem, helping him into the imperial carriage. The horses reared slightly, startled by the motion, and the driver cracked the reins. The wheels tore across the field, scattering a few rabbits that had tried to hitch a ride. But even as you rolled away, a dozen determined fluffballs galloped after you. One managed to keep pace for a shocking 30 meters before tripping over its own ears. Some claim they saw Napoleon glance out the carriage window and whisper, "Murd," under his breath. Whether that part's true or not is debatable. Historians still argue over just how dramatic the escape was. Some say the carriage nearly flipped in the grass. Others suggest the rabbits lost interest after the food ran out. One particularly colorful version even insists that a rabbit leapt into the carriage itself, causing Napoleon to scream like a child and toss his hat at it. You won't confirm or deny that one, but the image persists. Later that night, around the quiet campfires, the guests begin to decompress. One general, still finding tufts of rabbit fur in his sleeves, mutters, "They were relentless." Someone else, softly, "Like they had a plan." A third nods solemnly, "We never stood a chance." And they're only half joking. The truth is, it wasn't just the chaos that shocked everyone, it was the sheer determination of the rabbits. These weren't just confused animals reacting to a situation. They seemed to want something, to expect something. Maybe it was food, maybe it was attention. Maybe they were drawn by some ancient bunny instinct to destroy French pride one nibble at a time. Whatever the reason, they didn't behave like prey. They behaved like conquerors, and it shook people. Even now, you see it in their faces. Grown men, veterans of war, haunted not by cannon fire, but by the soft pitter-patter of adorable insurgents. You lie awake that night, staring at the canvas above you, wondering, was this fate? Was this divine irony? Was this a warning? Or maybe, just maybe, it was a reminder that no matter how great your empire, how legendary your reputation, or how grand your cheese spread, there will always be something out there with fluffier feet and a better strategy. You wake before sunrise, stirred not by bugle call or cannon fire, but by the sound of rustling linen and quiet muttering. The camp is stirring early today. You sit up on your cot, rubbing your eyes. Someone walks past with a clipboard, muttering under his breath, "Must have been over 800 of them." You sigh. It's starting already. The bunny incident has officially entered legend status. As you shuffle toward the main tent for morning orders, you notice a strange vibe in the air. Part embarrassment, part awe, part surreal amusement. Several officers are gathered at the table, trying to look serious as Marshal Berthier unrolls a report. In conclusion, Berthier says stiffly, the hunt should not be repeated under similar conditions. You suppress a snort. Should not be repeated is putting it mildly. Across the table, one of the more junior officers raises a hesitant hand. So, are we calling this a tactical failure, or? Berthier doesn't dignify that with a response. He just clears his throat and moves on. But the truth is, there's no escaping what happened. The Great Bunny Blitz is burned into everyone's memory like a slow-motion cannonball. No amount of dignity or denial will wash away the sight of Napoleon, jacket flapping, sprinting from a horde of fluffy revolutionaries. Still, some can't help but laugh, quietly, nervously like giggling in church. And then there are the bold ones. Someone in the mess tent has begun calling it the Fluffle Offensive. Another suggests naming a battalion after the incident, Les Le Pen's Volants, the Flying Rabbits. You're halfway through your tea when one of Napoleon's aides walks in, pale and tight-lipped. The Emperor wants everyone assembled by noon. You blink. That's soon. Too soon. What now? Turns out Napoleon's decided to address the incident head-on. By the time the midday sun is overhead, the officers are standing at attention in formation, coats straightened, medals glinting. You're in the third row, heart thudding as Napoleon appears, hands clasped behind his back. He surveys the group like a general surveying a battlefield, his expression unreadable. Then he begins. His voice is calm, measured. There are battles, he says, where the enemy is visible, armed, and expected. You nod. Standard rhetoric. There are other battles, he continues, where the enemy is smaller, fuzzier, less conventional. The air tightens. But victory, he says, allowing the barest trace of a smirk to form, comes not only from domination, but from adaptation. Somewhere behind you, a throat is cleared suspiciously loudly. You dare not turn around. Napoleon continues, clearly enjoying this more than he lets on. We encountered a force with enthusiasm, with speed, with what I can only describe as fearless momentum. Another officer coughs, this time clearly a suppressed laugh. I consider it, Napoleon adds, a lesson in humility and in nature's unpredictability. It's brilliant. He's flipping the entire thing, turning mockery into metaphor. You almost want to applaud. He finishes with a bow of his head. Let us move forward with vigilance. And perhaps next time, no carrots. The crowd erupts, not in laughter, not quite, but in a strange, respectful murmur of amusement and relief. The tension breaks. People smile again. Even Marshal Lannes chuckles. And just like that, Napoleon reclaims the narrative. But the story doesn't die. If anything, it spreads faster. That night, around campfires across France, soldiers are reenacting the whole thing with ridiculous flair. One guy even puts a fur hat on a melon and charges at his friend, shouting, "For the Warren!" You hear rumors that someone wrote a folk song about it, the hop heard round the world. But that might be a myth. Still, the imagery is everywhere. And the accounts, they vary wildly. Some say there were a few hundred rabbits. Others swear it was over 3,000. One dramatic officer insists he saw them form a phalanx. Another claims the rabbits were as large as foxes, which is clearly nonsense unless foxes suddenly weigh 3 pounds and smell like straw. Historians still argue about the numbers. Most place the count somewhere between 600 and 800 rabbits, farm-bred, accustomed to human hands, and very, very hungry. Napoleon's team, eager to impress, had overprepared. They thought more rabbits meant more fun. What they got was a critical mass of soft doom. The farm that provided them? According to some obscure accounts, the owner tried to warn Berthier. They're friendly. Berthier, in typical French administrative style, heard, "They're ready." You find this story in the footnotes of 2 memoirs. One claims the rabbits even broke into a pastry crate. Another claims Napoleon never left the carriage, and the entire thing is exaggerated. A few assert it never happened at all. But you know the truth. You saw the fur tsunami with your own eyes. Still, you're not surprised the incident has begun to take on a life of its own, mutating into legend, getting reshaped with every telling. A week later, while riding through a nearby village, a child sees your military jacket and says, "Did you fight the Bunny War?" You pause. Smile. "Yes," you say softly. "And I survived." The kid's eyes go wide. Were they fast? You nod solemnly. "Very." He runs off screaming "rabbits" like he's joining the resistance. It's fine. You've accepted your fate. You're now a veteran of France's fluffiest fiasco, and no medal will ever capture that level of psychological damage. Still, you can't help but wonder, what if it hadn't happened? What if Berthier had ordered wild hares instead? Would they have scattered? Would Napoleon have puffed on a cigar, bragged about his aim, and moved on without ever facing down his softest foe? But then, where's the fun in that? It's nearly dusk when you find yourself again beside Napoleon. Not at a battlefield, not in a gilded hall, but in the quiet, awkward shade of his personal tent. The candlelight flickers across maps and half-drunk wine, casting long, twitchy shadows. You almost expect a rabbit to dart through the flap, just for comedic effect. It's been days, but the trauma lives on. Napoleon is uncharacteristically quiet. He's staring at a chessboard, unmoving, his hand hovering over a pawn like it personally betrayed him. You're not sure if it's the game he's thinking about or the rabbits. Probably the rabbits. Finally, he speaks. "They didn't run." You blink. "The rabbits," he says. "They were supposed to run." He says it like he's still trying to negotiate with the memory. You consider responding with something soothing, but what do you say to an emperor undone by a herbivore uprising? So you go with honesty. "They were tame, sire." He grunts. "So are diplomats. They still bite when threatened." You suppress a smile. Napoleon leans back, fingers steepled. "Did you know," he says after a pause, "I once escaped a mutiny by jumping into a ditch filled with horse dung? You didn't. Corsica. I was 16. My cousin Lucien laughed so hard he fell off the wagon." The point hangs there. He's trying to remind himself. You've survived worse than rabbits. And you suppose he has. Cannon fire, shipwrecks, poisoned letters, betrayals, a literal snowbound retreat from Russia, though that's still a few years away. But none of them hit him quite like this. Because this wasn't war. This was supposed to be fun. That's what stings. He controls armies, redraws nations. But when he tried to enjoy one afternoon of light-hearted nobility, nature laughed in his face. Or maybe it wasn't nature. Maybe it was fate. Because the retreat wasn't just literal. It was metaphorical. A man famed for never backing down had fled a field without a shot fired. "Do you think they'll forget?" he asks quietly. "You don't lie?" No. Napoleon exhales slowly. Then we must make them laugh instead. That, more than any military maneuver, may be his greatest strategic move, because you notice something the next day. The narrative begins to shift. First, it's in how people refer to it, no longer as a disaster, but a curiosity, a peculiar misadventure. Some even call it le combat flou, the fuzzy engagement. Then, at dinner, Napoleon actually cracks a joke, a real one. Perhaps I should conscript them, fast, determined, and immune to cannon fire. The whole room erupts. It's cathartic. The absurdity binds everyone together. What once threatened to undermine him now humanizes him. And yet, you remember the flight. You remember the speed with which he yanked open that carriage door, the sharp edge of panic that flashed across his face. Not because of danger, but because something refused to obey. That's what really unnerved him. Napoleon is a man obsessed with control. He organizes, plans, dominates. And rabbits? Rabbits don't read memos. They operate on one rule: see food, pursue food. And maybe that's the real reason it stuck in everyone's mind. Not because it was humiliating, but because it showed even the Emperor of France can't outmaneuver chaos. Especially not the soft-footed, lettuce-motivated kind. Later that week, you accompany Napoleon on a ride to inspect local fortifications. The air is fresh, the horses calm, and for once nothing weird happens. Until Napoleon points at a distant burrow and says dryly, "Send scouts!" Could be another uprising. You burst out laughing. He smirks. It's become folklore now. A tale told with 1 part truth, 2 parts exaggeration, and a generous ladle of national seasoning. Some say Napoleon ordered the rabbits personally. Others claim a rival, perhaps Talleyrand, sabotaged the crates. A popular tavern version insists the rabbits were descendants of a royal breed trained to disrupt enemy feasts. Historians still argue over the cause of the attack. Was it sheer logistical incompetence, a supplier's mix-up, or divine comedy at the expense of hubris? The reality is probably mundane. Berthier, ever the efficient planner, wanted a successful hunt. He bought rabbits in bulk from the cheapest, most plentiful source, domestic farms. Tame rabbits don't fear humans. They approach them, especially if their only previous experience of people-involved snacks. So when hundreds of fluff balls were dumped into a field surrounded by people holding fruit and dressed like French pastries, well, you do the math. But context doesn't matter to legend. What matters is that for once, Napoleon wasn't just the lion of Europe. He was a man. A man who tripped on a route trying to dodge a rabbit. A man who lost to enthusiasm and unblinking eyes. And somehow that made him more invincible than ever. Because after that, nothing else could touch him. Political scandal? Please. He survived the bunny battle. Failed negotiations? He's already outrun his own food. He even begins signing off letters with a doodle of a tiny rabbit, just the ears and 2 dots for eyes. At least, that's what the palace staff claim. So you write your own note that evening, fold it carefully, slide it into your journal. July 1807. I saw Napoleon Bonaparte run, not from swords, nor ships, nor siege, but from softness. And he smiled afterward. That's how I know the empire is still safe. You blow out the candle and settle into bed. No rustling tonight, no twitching, just peace. And maybe, in some field far away, one very proud rabbit still chewing on an imperial napkin. It's nearly dusk when you find yourself again beside Napoleon. Not at a battlefield, not in a gilded hall, but in the quiet, awkward shade of his personal tent. The candlelight flickers across maps and half-drunk wine, casting long, twitchy shadows. You almost expect a rabbit to dart through the flap just for comedic effect. It's been days, but the trauma lives on. Napoleon is uncharacteristically quiet. He's staring at a chessboard, unmoving. His hand hovering over a pawn like it personally betrayed him. You're not sure if it's the game he's thinking about or the rabbits. Probably the rabbits. Finally, he speaks. They didn't run. You blink. The rabbits, he says, they were supposed to run. He says it like he's still trying to negotiate with the memory. You consider responding with something soothing, but what do you say to an emperor undone by a herbivore uprising? So you go with honesty. They were tame, sire. He grunts. So are diplomats. They still bite when threatened. You suppress a smile. Napoleon leans back, fingers steepled. Did you know, he says after a pause, I once escaped a mutiny by jumping into a ditch filled with horse dung? You didn't. Corsica. I was 16. My cousin Lucien laughed so hard he fell off the wagon. The point hangs there. He's trying to remind himself, you've survived worse than rabbits. And you suppose he has. Cannon fire, shipwrecks, poisoned letters, betrayals, a literal snowbound retreat from Russia, though that's still a few years away. But none of them hit him quite like this. Because this wasn't war. This was supposed to be fun. That's what stings. He controls armies, redraws nations, but when he tried to enjoy one afternoon of lighthearted nobility, nature laughed in his face. Or maybe it wasn't nature. Maybe it was fate. Because the retreat wasn't just literal. It was metaphorical. A man famed for never backing down had fled a field without a shot fired. Do you think they'll forget? He asks quietly. You don't lie. No. Napoleon exhales slowly. Then we must make them laugh instead. That, more than any military maneuver, may be his greatest strategic move. Because you notice something the next day. The narrative begins to shift. First, it's in how people refer to it, no longer as a disaster but a curiosity, a peculiar misadventure. Some even call it le combat flou, the fuzzy engagement. Then at dinner, Napoleon actually cracks a joke, a real one. Perhaps I should conscript them, fast, determined, and immune to cannon fire. The whole room erupts. It's cathartic. The absurdity binds everyone together. What once threatened to undermine him now humanizes him. And yet, you remember the flight. You remember the speed with which he yanked open that carriage door. The sharp edge of panic that flashed across his face. Not because of danger, but because something refused to obey. That's what really unnerved him. Napoleon is a man obsessed with control. He organizes, plans, dominates. And rabbits? Rabbits don't read memos. They operate on one rule: see food, pursue food. And maybe that's the real reason it stuck in everyone's mind, not because it was humiliating, but because it showed even the Emperor of France can't outmaneuver chaos. Especially not the soft-footed, lettuce-motivated kind. Later that week, you accompany Napoleon on a ride to inspect local fortifications. The air is fresh, the horses calm, and for once, nothing weird happens. Until Napoleon points at a distant burrow and says dryly, "Send scouts. Could be another uprising." You burst out laughing. He smirks. It's become folklore now. A tale told with 1 part truth, 2 parts exaggeration, and a generous ladle of national seasoning. Some say Napoleon ordered the rabbits personally. Others claim a rival, perhaps Talleyrand, sabotaged the crates. A popular tavern version insists the rabbits were descendants of a royal breed trained to disrupt enemy feasts. Historians still argue over the cause of the attack. Was it sheer logistical incompetence? A supplier's mix-up? Or divine comedy at the expense of hubris? The reality is probably mundane. Berthier, ever the efficient planner, wanted a successful hunt. He bought rabbits in bulk from the cheapest, most plentiful source: domestic farms. Tame rabbits don't fear humans. They approach them, especially if their only previous experience of people involved snacks. So when hundreds of fluff balls were dumped into a field surrounded by people holding fruit and dressed like French pastries, well, you do the math. But context doesn't matter to legend. What matters is that for once, Napoleon wasn't just the lion of Europe. He was a man. A man who tripped on a root trying to dodge a rabbit. A man who lost to enthusiasm and unblinking eyes. And somehow, that made him more invincible than ever. Because after that, nothing else could touch him. Political scandal? Please. He survived the bunny battle. Failed negotiations? He's already outrun his own food. He even begins signing off letters with a doodle of a tiny rabbit, just the ears and 2 dots for eyes. At least that's what the palace staff claim. So you write your own note that evening, fold it carefully, slide it into your journal. July 1807, I saw Napoleon Bonaparte run, not from swords, nor ships, nor siege, but from softness, and he smiled afterward. That's how I know the empire is still safe. You blow out the candle and settle into bed. No rustling tonight, no twitching, just peace. And maybe in some field far away, one very proud rabbit still chewing on an imperial napkin. The weeks roll on, and Europe's attention shifts back to the usual. Treaties, troop movements, whispers of coalitions forming and collapsing faster than soufflés at altitude. But in your quiet corner of the imperial world, the bunny legend has only grown teeth. Adorable, grass-stained teeth. One morning, you ride ahead of the main party with a few scouts. The road is muddy and quiet. Somewhere in the trees, a nightingale sings, and for a moment, it's peaceful. You almost forget. Then you see it. Carved into a tree trunk, Napoleon vs. Les Lapins, 1807. Below it, someone's etched a stick figure in a bicorn hat being swarmed by dots labeled hop. You stare at it, deadpan. Your horse snorts, clearly unimpressed. It's spreading faster than smallpox. Back at camp, someone's handing out souvenir handkerchiefs. You pick one up. Embroidered in one corner is a rabbit standing on a pile of medals holding a tiny French flag. You're not sure if you should laugh or report this to Berthier. You do both. Berthier sighs. At least they're not using real rabbits. He's trying to move past the scandal, but you can tell it still keeps him up at night. You once saw him stare at a plate of stew for 10 minutes before asking, "What meat is this?" The rabbit incident has passed into folklore now, something between battle wound and bedtime tale. Kids imitate it in alleyways. Politicians whisper about it in salons. Artists begin incorporating rabbits into oil paintings, not in the center, of course, but tucked in corners, nibbling on discarded scrolls, peeking from under tables. One particularly bold artist paints Napoleon crossing the Alps. Except instead of a war horse, he's riding a giant rabbit. The painting mysteriously disappears within 2 days. No one talks about it again. And yet, what fascinates you most isn't how people laugh. It's how they reinterpret. They start treating it like a metaphor. The rabbits, one general declares over wine, represent the inevitability of disruption. Even in the most controlled systems, chaos finds a way to chew through the tent ropes. Or the lettuce, someone adds, helpfully. The incident becomes a parable, a parlor room philosophy. People draw parallels to politics, to pride, to overconfidence. You hear a priest refer to it as a divine moment of levity, proof that even emperors must bow before the absurd. Historians still argue whether this kind of symbolism was ever intended. Was it a quirky footnote in Napoleon's otherwise titanic saga, or a prophetic sign of his vulnerability? You know what the records say, or rather, what they don't say. No official bulletins mention the rabbit hunt. None of the dispatches from the imperial court include it. Berthier's logs that week are curiously sterile. No unusual events. Lunch delayed, weather mild. But oral tradition fills the gaps, and in some ways, it's more powerful than paper. Which brings you to your next surprise, the puppet show. It happens in a village square while your unit's quartered nearby. You go for a stroll after dinner and hear a crowd laughing. Curious, you slip through the crowd just in time to see a puppet dressed in a green officer's coat, yelling, "They're upon us," while fuzzy rabbit dolls bounce from the rafters, squeaking chaos. You watch, stone-faced, as Puppet Napoleon dives off stage into a laundry basket. The kids cheer. One little girl turns to her brother and says, "He's not scary at all, just silly." You realize then, this story is mutating. It's not just a joke now, it's comfort. People are using it to disarm the legend of Napoleon, to tame the myth. And you're not sure if that's good or bad. Napoleon, of course, doesn't know about the puppet show. You consider telling him, then decide you like living, but you do tell him about the carving on the tree. His reaction is unexpected. He raises an eyebrow, then says, "Did they draw me with the correct number of medals?" You blink. "Yes?" "Good," he says, returning to his paperwork. "Accuracy matters." That's Napoleon for you. You wonder sometimes how he really feels about it all, whether he still replays it at night, imagining what he could have done differently. Marched at a different angle, worn taller boots, hired a different farm. But then again, maybe he's already moved on. The emperor has always been 2 steps ahead. What looks like humility now might be strategic memory control later. By owning the bunny narrative, he turns it into something harder to weaponize. And the more the world laughs with him, the harder it is to laugh at him. Still, you can't help but think no one really controls their story. Not even emperors. You jot that down in your journal, under a sketch of a rabbit wearing a laurel crown. As night falls, the wind carries a rustle through the trees. Leaves? You hope, because the last time you said that, a rabbit climbed into your saddlebag and ate your emergency map. Lesson learned. Never underestimate soft things with sharp teeth. It's well past midnight when the courier arrives. He's winded, muddy, and clutching a sealed scroll like it's a loaf of bread in a famine. You're roused from a half-dream, something about cannon fire and a rabbit in a bicorn hat directing troops, and stumble toward the command tent, boots unlaced and brain only half on. Napoleon's already there, fully dressed, of course. The man seems to exist in a permanent state of readiness, or revenge, or both. The scroll is from Paris, and it contains poetry. You read the first lines aloud, cautiously. "O valiant bunnies, fierce and fleet, who turned back France on tiny feet." You stop. Napoleon raises an eyebrow. "It's an epic," you say weakly. He takes the scroll, scans it, and chuckles. Chuckles. Then, terrifyingly, reads another verse out loud. "From crates they burst with thunderous paws, defied all guns, defied all laws." A long pause. Then Napoleon looks up and says, deadpan, "At least they rhyme." So that's where we are now. The Fluffle Offensive has been immortalized in poetry, and not just any poetry, popular poetry. Copies are circulating in salons and academies. One tavern is reportedly giving a free pint to anyone who can recite all 4 stanzas without laughing. Napoleon lets it happen. No bans, no censorship, no arrests. You suspect he's realizing something. When you fight satire, it multiplies. But when you embrace it, lean into the ridiculous, it becomes less dangerous. That's why 3 days later, he does something no one expects. He commissions a tapestry. Yes, a tapestry. You stand with the artisans as they unveil the draft sketch. It's elegant, tasteful, until you reach the lower left corner, where a cluster of embroidered rabbits is shown dashing across the battlefield, trampling a baguette. Napoleon inspects it carefully, then points to a rabbit and says, "That one's too thin. Make him plumper." You're beginning to suspect he's enjoying this. The court certainly is. Fashion has taken notice. One dressmaker begins selling lapin-lined gloves, joking that they offer the grip of conquest. A bootmaker in Lyon markets bunny-proof soles, guaranteed to withstand small mammalian ambushes. Meanwhile, you overhear soldiers ranking the rabbits by tactical prowess. The gray ones were shock troops. No, the white ones used misdirection. That brown blur, easily their general. You don't correct them. At this point, it's tradition. Historians would later label this moment the birth of rabbit theater, a brief but glorious window in which French society became obsessed with all things lapine. And then, of course, someone writes a play. It's a farce, performed in a provincial town you pass through. You and a few others attend in disguise. The set is minimal. The plot? Napoleon attempts to host a royal feast, only for the entire guest list to be replaced by rabbits in wigs. The audience howls with laughter. One actor, playing Napoleon, attempts to reason with the bunny council. Another, as Berthier, weeps over a spreadsheet labeled "Projected Bunny Behavior." You glance at the real Berthier in the seat beside you. He does not laugh. He folds his arms and mutters, "That is not how rabbits move." Still, no one complains. No one storms out. And when the actor playing Napoleon is defeated by an avalanche of stuffed toys tossed from the wings, the crowd leaps to its feet. You leave the theater dazed. Because here's the thing. Something about the event unlocked people. They feel freer. Like they've all shared a collective absurdity so potent, so deeply improbable, that reality itself cracked open just a bit. The man who ruled with logic and thunder was undone by bunnies. And now, anything seems possible. Even laughter, even humility, even softness. It's unsettling in a good way. Even for Napoleon. He doesn't admit it, but you start to notice little things. He adds more humor to his speeches. He pauses sometimes when rabbits are mentioned, not to scowl but to smirk, like he's remembering something that belongs only to him. And most shockingly of all, he keeps the tapestry, hangs it in a hallway near his war room. So every time a general walks past to plan a campaign, he must also glance at a finely woven depiction of imperial defeat by rabbit stampede. That, you think, is power. Because ridicule has a strange effect. It either crushes you or it liberates you. And Napoleon impossibly seems liberated. People admire him more, not less. He's no longer just a symbol of conquest and strategy. He's real, relatable in the strangest possible way. And that, more than any battlefield victory, might be the reason his legend endures. Still, late at night, when the wind howls and the fire crackles low, you sometimes hear it, the soft thump-thump of many feet. You lie still, because deep down part of you wonders, what if they come back? You're inspecting a supply wagon one overcast morning when a young courier gallops into camp, face pale, boots covered in what you hope is just mud. He dismounts too quickly and stumbles, nearly colliding with a barrel of pickled onions. You wince on his behalf. He rushes over, panting. "Urgent message, sir, from the coast, about rabbits." Your blood runs cold. Not again. You take the scroll, break the seal, and read fast. It's from a regional commander near the channel. Farmers are complaining. Crops have been devoured. The pattern is unusual, coordinated. Night raids. Cabbages bitten clean through the middle. One rabbit was found inside a barn, curled in a soldier's bedroll. There's a drawing included. The ears are suspiciously upright. You glance up. Is this a joke? The courier shrugs. They swear it's real. You sigh deeply. Rub your temples. You're not ready for round two. Later that day, you bring the scroll to Napoleon. He's sketching troop positions with a charcoal pencil, entirely absorbed. You wait. He finishes shading a hilltop, then glances at you. Well? You hand him the scroll without a word. He reads. His lips twitch. Then he chuckles. They've learned tactics. You raise an eyebrow. They're flanking us, he adds, entirely deadpan. You groan. Please don't encourage this. But it's too late. He's amused now. That evening at dinner, he reads excerpts from the message aloud. Officers laugh. Some groan. One particularly drunk colonel swears he's going to train a hawk just in case. The word rabbit watch is scrawled on the back of a napkin. By morning, it's an actual patrol schedule, because no one's willing to bet against the bunnies twice. You spend the week reviewing crop damage, talking to farmers, inspecting suspicious nibble marks, and chasing rumors. Most of it, you're sure, is just wildlife and coincidence. But the fear is real. The legend has become a lens. People are seeing rabbits differently now. Less like prey, more like pranksters. Agents of some strange natural order that refuses to be tamed. Historians would later call this period the Lapin paranoia. For a few months, reports flooded in from across France. Rabbits crossing roads in suspicious numbers, behaving oddly, or gathering in unnerving formations. One tale describes a rabbit army marching down a hill in neat rows. Another insists they danced in a circle under the full moon. Historians still argue, you mutter to yourself, whether that one was satire or mass hysteria. Your favorite? The claim that a rabbit stood up on its hind legs and saluted a passing regiment. Even you don't believe that one. Probably. And then there's the merchant who tries to capitalize on the craze by selling anti-rabbit charms, made of garlic, copper wire, and dried frog feet. You consider buying one for Berthier as a joke, then decide that might kill him. Still, among the madness, one moment sticks out. You're walking through a small village market when you spot a wooden carving on display. It's detailed, clearly crafted by someone with time and skill. It shows a rabbit, big eyes, soft ears, perched atop a cannon barrel, as if surveying a conquered field. You ask the carver, is this supposed to be from the picnic incident? He nods proudly. That's Le Lapin General. You chuckle. Why a general? He shrugs. He won. Fair point. You buy it. Back in camp, you set it on your desk. Every time you glance at it, you feel a weird mix of respect, horror, and amusement, just like everyone else. Because here's the truth. Deep down, no one's over it. Not the emperor, not the officers, not the farmers, not even you. Because when people remember the bunny blitz, they don't remember shame. They remember the feeling, that sudden, shocking overturn of expectations, the raw absurdity, the helplessness and laughter. The very human realization that sometimes life drops a soft, ridiculous anvil onto your head, and all you can do is stagger around blinking and try not to slip on a brioche. Napoleon, for all his planning and pride, has come to accept this. In fact, he begins referencing it in strange little ways. He has a new paperweight, a bronze rabbit. He ends a letter to the Austrian court with, "Let us not allow our talks to multiply like rabbits, unless it's in friendship." Talleyrand claims that one made Metternich choke on his wine. The joke, it seems, is no longer on Napoleon. It's his to wield. You wonder sometimes if that's how legends really work. Not in the grand battles, but in the way people retell the failures. Not to mock, but to marvel, that a man so high could fall so softly. That the emperor was, in one wild moment, just a guy trying to escape a field of overeager fluffballs. That makes him human. And that's unforgettable. You wake to a knock on the tent pole. Not a thunderous one, more of a polite tap-tap, the kind that says, "This isn't urgent, but it might be funny." You open the flap and find a young aide holding a slim wooden box. "From the Imperial Toy Maker," he says, like that's a completely normal phrase. You raise an eyebrow. He shrugs. Apparently, a gift. You open it. Inside, nestled in red velvet, is a set of hand-painted toy soldiers. Napoleonic uniforms, neatly detailed, being chased across a tiny green field by slightly oversized toy rabbits with exaggerated teeth. The plaque reads, "The Emperor's Finest Hour." You blink, then burst out laughing. Because it's official now. The bunny incident has gone commercial. The box is beautiful, finely crafted. It even includes a miniature picnic basket, which one of the rabbits is halfway inside. Another rabbit is chewing the hat off a general. A third is pushing over a cannon. Napoleon sees it later that day, and to your surprise, he doesn't scowl, doesn't sigh. He actually picks up one of the rabbits, examines it, and mutters, "This one looks like Berthier." You nearly drop your pen. The shift is real now. Tangible. What began as an embarrassment has turned into a moment of shared myth-making. A national in-joke, a symbol of the absurd in an otherwise rigid world. Even the army begins embracing it. A regiment marching through the countryside starts playing a new tune on fifes and drums. A playful rhythm some say is based on the rabbit's attack pattern. They call it La Charge des Lapins. Children dance to it in town squares. One night, by a campfire, a young soldier sings a lullaby version. Bunny, bunny, in the grass, faster than a cannon's blast. The whole fire circle joins in by the third verse. You realize something profound is happening. In a time defined by conquest, fear, and endless campaigns, people are clinging to joy. To something silly, yes, but also safe. The rabbit tale is harmless. It has no blood, no grief, no loss, except a slice of dignity and a few pastries. It's the softest kind of shared trauma, the kind you laugh about forever. And for an empire that's constantly sharpening its edges, that's rare and precious. Even the Pope hears of it. An emissary arrives with a letter bearing the papal seal. You expect politics. Instead, it opens with, "We pray that His Imperial Majesty be spared future encounters with the beasts of the field, however hoppy they may be." It's signed with a flourish and a tiny paw print doodle. At this point, nothing surprises you. You hear whispers that the Empress Josephine has acquired a pet rabbit, white with one black ear, and named it Maréchal Carotte. Rumor has it she lets it roam the palace gardens, and when guests ask, she just says, "He's very strategic." You know it's a joke. You hope it's a joke. Meanwhile, historians continue bickering about the facts. Some insist the number of rabbits was only 500. Others say 3,000. A few radical voices claim it never happened at all, that it was a metaphor, a fable, a dream disguised as history. But you were there. You remember the stampede, the squeaks, the blur of fur and chaos, and the look on Napoleon's face. He'll never forget either. But the legacy of the event isn't just laughter, it's adaptation. Because in the months that follow, Napoleon's leadership shifts ever so slightly. He listens a bit longer in meetings. He asks, what are the unintended consequences more than he used to? And once, when a junior officer proposes a river crossing plan, Napoleon simply asks, and what if the current behaves like the rabbits? Silence. Then everyone nods. The Fluffle Offensive has become more than a joke. It's become a strategy model. Account for chaos. Expect the illogical. Assume nothing runs from you just because you wear a hat. It's brilliant, really. One afternoon, you ride beside the Emperor through golden fields. The breeze is warm. A few birds chirp lazily overhead. Then, from a cluster of tall grass, a rabbit hops out and pauses on the path. You freeze. So does Napoleon. The rabbit sniffs, blinks, hops on, unconcerned. Napoleon watches it vanish. Then he turns to you and says softly, "Tell Berthier we're not hunting this year." You nod. No one argues. And deep in your pocket, you carry a tiny silver coin, struck unofficially, of course, with Napoleon's profile on one side and on the other. A rabbit mid-leap. They call it le sou de la pomme. Collectors will one day treasure it. But to you, it's more than currency. It's proof that history can be funny and still matter. It's late September now, and the air holds the first hints of autumn. Trees lining the roads begin to shed their golden armor. And everything, from the horses to the couriers, moves a little slower, like the whole empire is exhaling. And yet, beneath this calm, the rabbit legacy thrives. At a village just beyond Strasbourg, you witness something remarkable, a harvest festival with a rabbit theme. You and a few aides stop out of curiosity, expecting hay bales and cider. Instead, you find papier-mâché bunnies hanging from arches, embroidered cloths showing the Great Bunny Charge, and a contest where children reenact the picnic incident in full costume. You watch as a tiny boy dressed as Napoleon valiantly attempts to flee from a horde of toddlers in rabbit ears. One of them tackles his leg, and the crowd cheers. The emperor goes down dramatically, clutching his hat. A local woman sidles up beside you. We tell it every year now, she says. Teaches the children that even great men can have silly days. You nod, smiling. But inside, you feel something shift. Because this is bigger than humor now. It's identity. The story has embedded itself in the national psyche, not as a moment of shame but of balance, a soft check against a hard world. A reminder that life isn't always cannons and conquests. Sometimes it's chaos with ears. Napoleon, for his part, leans into the tale when it suits him. He's always been a master of narrative. He knows that to endure, a leader must become more than a figure. They must become a story, something people repeat, reshape, and pass on. And the rabbits? They're his footnote, his shadow of absurdity, his proof that even emperors can run. He even references it in dispatches now, sparingly, strategically. After a tense negotiation with a Bavarian envoy, he reportedly said, "Let us not chase each other in circles like rabbits in a field." The room fell silent, unsure if it was a joke or a threat. Maybe both. Meanwhile, back in Paris, an enterprising publisher compiles every known version of the incident into a book, The Day the Empire Hopped. It's equal parts history, satire, and children's illustrations. You skim through a copy and nearly choke on your wine when you see one particular page. Napoleon in a cradle being rocked by two maternal-looking rabbits. You think about sending a copy to the emperor, then decide to keep your head attached to your shoulders. But not everyone's amused. Among Napoleon's inner circle, there are still holdouts, realists, traditionalists, men who think the entire tale weakens the crown. Marshal Davout is especially incensed. "They're not laughing with us," he grumbles. "They're laughing at us." Berthier, surprisingly, disagrees. Better they laugh and remember than forget entirely. You find this interesting because Berthier, the very man responsible for the rabbit procurement, has undergone his own transformation. Where once he was rigid, now he's flexible. Where once he dreaded the mention of fur, he now rolls his eyes and smiles faintly when soldiers sneak carrots onto his desk. "He's healing," you joke once to a corporal. "I still wouldn't bring him a rabbit stew," the man replies. "Fair enough. As for you, the whole affair has changed how you look at history. You always thought of the past as a stern thing, statues and scrolls, declarations and decrees. But this moment, fleeting, ridiculous, holds more power than 100 speeches. Because it sticks, it lives in the mouths of the people. Even now, you hear it in a song sung by washerwomen near a stream. Run, run, the emperor runs, from fluff and fur and carrot guns. It's terrible poetry, but you hum it anyway, and somehow the empire feels stronger for it. Not because it conquered, but because it could laugh. Still, the legend evolves. Some stories now claim Napoleon tried to recruit the rabbits into an elite unit. Others say he built a secret rabbit-proof fortress in northern France. One ballad insists the original bunny commander still lives in the woods near the battlefield, awaiting a second chance to strike. You don't argue with any of them, because that's the nature of myth. It stops being about truth and starts being about meaning. And the meaning here is clear. Even the most powerful man in the world is not immune to a surprise. Even he can fall, gently, comically, only to rise with a grin, and that somehow is more comforting than any victory. You ride past a quiet glade one evening, the same field where it all began. The grass has grown back. No crates, no chaos, just wind and rustling leaves. You dismount, stand in silence. Then, almost on cue, a single rabbit hops out from the underbrush. It pauses, looks up at you, sniffs, then casually hops away. No attack, no flurry, just peace. You smile and tip your hat. You return to Paris in the winter, where the streets wear their usual coats of frost and politics. Everything crackles underfoot. Ice, gossip, expectation. But beneath the stiff collars and powdered wigs, one subject still slips through the cracks like steam from a kitchen. The bunny incident. It greets you in salons, where wealthy patrons sip brandy and murmur, "Did you hear? They're calling him Napoleon now." Some snort at their own cleverness. It clings to the stage, where a new comedy, Les Lapins de l'Empereur, has already sold out 3 nights in a row. You attend a showing, hidden in a corner seat. The laughter is thunderous, relentless. It's almost surreal. On stage, a puppet Napoleon commands his generals, "Form ranks, protect the soufflé," to which a chorus of rabbits responds in song, "We come for your croissants." You've seen battle, Siege, storm, but you've never seen joy deployed with such precision. The Emperor knows. He always knows. But does he care? At a private gathering in the Tuileries, you find out. The hall is gold and velvet, candles dripping wax like lazy ghosts. You're half a glass into a very good red wine when Napoleon appears. He moves easily among his guests, tossing comments and half smiles like coins to a fountain. And then, inevitably, someone brings it up. A duke, too confident, not quite drunk enough to be excused. Majesty, he says, I've heard the rabbits are planning their next campaign. There's a freeze, utensils pause, musicians falter, but Napoleon doesn't blink. Instead, he lifts his glass and says, let them come. I have carrots now. The room erupts, cheers, laughter, even applause. Just like that, he controls the moment. That's what separates him. Not just strategy, not just speeches, but timing. He's turned humiliation into heritage. In fact, you later learn he's ordered a small mural commissioned, hidden deep in the palace, for private viewings only. It depicts the bunny attack in Renaissance style, complete with cherubic hairs descending from the clouds. At the center, a noble yet bewildered Napoleon, sword drawn, defending a cheese platter. When asked why he wanted it, he simply said, history must be honest and generous. You begin to wonder, has he planned this all along? After all, few rulers would allow a tale like this to live. But Napoleon? He feeds it. At a military academy graduation, he references it again, gently, subtly. Command well, know your terrain, and never assume your enemy has two legs. The cadets laugh, but they nod too, because there's something deeper there. The rabbit charge, absurd as it was, taught them something. You remember that day vividly, the scramble, the surprise, the sheer, ridiculous panic. And you remember, above all, how quickly everything you thought unshakable shook. The world feels different now, looser, livelier, like even the gears of empire can skip a beat and still spin on. In this new Paris, the tale has taken root like ivy across marble. Artists paint it, bakers sculpt it in marzipan. One scholar even publishes a dissertation titled Hares and Hierarchies, Deconstructing the Picnic Panic. You skim it, it's exhausting. But the cover illustration, a solemn rabbit sitting on Napoleon's throne, is worth the read. Outside the city, word spreads further. In rural provinces, old men start adding rabbit encounters to their war stories. I once saw one eat half a map, says one. Changed the whole campaign. Merchants rebrand products, Lupin Imperial Honey, Bonaparte's Bunny Biscuits, and less successfully, Berthier's Regret Soap. That one doesn't sell well. Meanwhile, at court, Berthier takes it all with quiet resignation. He's developed a twitch in his left eye. You no longer mention fur around him, but you do notice that the rabbit sculpture he once tried to destroy now sits on his desk. You ask about it once. He just sighs. It was either that or people to give me live ones. Daily. Fair. Not all reactions are passive. A rival general, deeply embittered by Napoleon's popularity, tries to weaponize the tale in political circles. He let rabbits overrun him. How can he lead Europe? The smear doesn't land, because everyone, everywhere, already knows. And they like the story. It's oddly comforting. The emperor who could command lightning also once lost a skirmish to fluff. That makes him human. And what people love, what they truly remember, is not just power. It's vulnerability survived. The tale continues to travel. Ships take it to Italy, to Spain, even to Egypt. In Cairo, a French officer tells a caravan master, our leader once faced 1,000 beasts with tiny swords in their mouths. The translator is confused. The local children laugh for hours. You begin to wonder how far the myth will spread. Far enough, you suspect, to outlive all of you. Because history has two engines, truth and story, and sometimes the story runs longer. Spring creeps into France like a sly grin. The frost melts, the wind softens, and tulips poke their heads up as if checking whether the coast is clear. They'll never know about the rabbits. Probably better that way. You find yourself stationed near a sleepy town where time moves a little slower, and for a few rare days, nothing needs commanding, documenting, or surviving. The locals, curious but warm, offer fresh bread, ask gentle questions, and, of course, mention the bunny incident within 3 minutes of meeting you. You've stopped flinching. At this point, you almost welcome it. The way people tell it now has changed. It's not just the tale of an emperor bested by fluff. It's a shared wink, a reassurance. The idea that even the most formidable empires can take a pratfall and keep marching. You wander through the countryside one afternoon, taking a rare moment for yourself. There's a gentle creak, birdsong overhead, and the kind of breeze that carries forgotten memories. Then you see it, carved into the base of an old elm tree. Napoleon was here. So were the bunnies. You run a hand over the letters. The carving is deep, meant to last. You smile, shake your head. It's absurd and eternal. Back in town, a school teacher invites you to speak to her students. You accept. Why not? They're wide-eyed and bouncing in their seats, and not just because someone gave them candied plums. You tell them about strategy, about honor, about logistics, and then, inevitably, a hand shoots up. Did you see the rabbits? You pause, then nod. Yes, you say. I saw them charge. A gasp runs through the room. One small boy whispers, were they huge? You shake your head solemnly. No, they were just determined. And there it is again, that glimmer in their eyes, that flicker of awe, the strange respect children always give to things that make adults nervous. You realize they've grown up with the story. It's not news to them. It's folklore. A few days later, while reviewing supply requests, you come across something odd. A regiment requesting permission to sew rabbit patches onto their uniforms. Not official insignias, just little embroidered bunnies on the inside of their coat flaps. You raise an eyebrow. Morale, the note says. For luck, for legacy. You grant it. Why not? Napoleon, you suspect, would approve. He's not the same man he was when this all began. Still ambitious, still calculating, but now shaded with something softer. Not weakness, no, just whimsy. And whimsy, it turns out, makes for excellent camouflage. The world doesn't know what to do with a man who laughs at himself. He wins anyway. He's even started signing letters with a small symbol, a stylized N, followed by 2 ears. It's subtle. You notice it once, tucked in the corner of a note to a Spanish general. No one mentions it, but they see it, and they remember. One night, by candlelight, you flip through your old journal. There it is, entry after entry, documenting every step of this nonsense. The panic, the poetry, the parades, and through it all, one truth shines brighter than ever. This happened. No matter how absurd it sounds, no matter how embroidered the retellings become, the rabbits ran, the emperor fled, and somehow the world tilted just a little on its axis. You find yourself sketching in the margins, a rabbit wearing a tiny crown holding a scroll. You chuckle, then pause, because deep down, you know how the story will be told in 100 years. Not with footnotes, not in dusty tomes, but around fires, at bedtime, in songs and games, and always with a laugh, because that's how the strangest truths endure. You hear it again before you fall asleep that night. Just the wind through the grass, probably, but it sounds an awful lot like pause. Or applause. You close your eyes and dream of fur. The years pass, as they always do. Battles rage and fade. Borders shift. Alliances bloom and wither. Napoleon's star rises high, blazes, and eventually burns at the edges. But the rabbit story? It never dims. In fact, it grows stronger in the shadows of history. You're older now. You feel it in your knees, in the stiffness that sets in after a long ride, in the way your uniform fits a little looser around the shoulders. You're no longer on the front lines. These days, you consult, you advise, you sit at polished desks and nod gravelly as maps unfurl. But the tale follows you. One afternoon, while inspecting a military academy in Lyon, a young cadet shyly presents you with a sketch. My father said you were there, he says, eyes wide. When it happened, you glance at the paper. It's charmingly crude. Napoleon, mid-run, flanked by towering cartoonish rabbits. The proportions are all wrong, the colors garish, the rabbits possibly wearing monocles, but the energy is perfect. You laugh. You thank him. Later, you frame it, because it's happening now. You are becoming part of the myth. And it's strange, because the story never should have lasted. It was supposed to be a blip, an accident, an anecdote shared in quiet corners. But instead, it became something else. A release. A counterweight to the gravity of empire. It doesn't replace the epic narratives of conquest or strategy, but it rounds them out, adds depth, humanity, humor. And over time, Napoleon himself has come to understand that better than anyone. You visit him once, long after the glory days, long after the drums have quieted and the cheers have faded. He's not in exile yet. Not quite. But the crown is heavier now. The days are slower. You sit together in a small room lined with maps and silence. And then, unexpectedly, he says, I should have brought better carrots. You blink, then laugh. He grins. No one believes it, he adds. Some call it propaganda. Others say I made it up to test discipline. You nod. Historians still argue. He chuckles again. Let them. Then he grows quiet. After a pause, he looks at you, not as the emperor, not as a commander, but just as a man, tired, remembering. You know, he says softly, that was the last time I ran without thinking. You're not sure what to say, so you just sit with him. Later, when you leave the room, you notice a small item on his desk, a carved rabbit, tucked among quills and letters. One ear is chipped, the paint is fading, but it's there, still. Back in Paris, the myth has taken root far beyond the salons and theaters. It appears in university lectures, in political satire, in children's books. One version paints the rabbits as divine messengers. Another claims it was a curse from a baker whose tarts had been rejected. There's even a secret society, Les Frères du Flocon, who meet monthly in rabbit masks to honor the day chaos triumphed over control. You don't ask what they do at these meetings, but a friend tells you there are snacks, always carrots. Eventually, Napoleon is gone, and yet, not. His legend persists, bold and brilliant. But always, just behind it, nipping at its heels, is the bunny story. In the margins of biographies, in footnotes of textbooks, in whispers from one generation to the next. You, of course, are long retired by then. You live in a quiet cottage with a sloping roof and a garden where, on occasion, real rabbits come to nibble your herbs. You don't shoo them away. You sit on the porch with a blanket and a book and watch them hop in the fading light. One evening, a group of local schoolchildren stop by. They've heard the rumors. One of them shyly asks, "Is it true? Were you there?" You lean back, smile, and say, "Yes, I was there when history hiccuped." Their eyes widen. You don't tell them everything. You leave out the panic, the stains, the way grown men screamed like wind-up toys. But you do tell them what matters. That sometimes, in the middle of the most serious moment, the world reminds us how silly we are. They laugh. One little girl tugs your sleeve and asks, "Were you scared?" You nod, terrified. "And did you win?" You pause, then grin. Eventually. That night, as they skip off down the path, you close your eyes and let the breeze carry their laughter. Because in the end, the empire will crumble. Maps will change, statues will fall, but the rabbits, they'll hop on. Wind down. And now, the candle burns low. The world of empire and fluff gently fades behind us. Picture it, a warm field under a setting sun, soft grass brushing your boots, and far in the distance, a few small ears bobbing through the green. No war, no noise, just the hush of memory and a whisper of whimsy on the wind. The laughter, the stories, the moment when power tripped over pause, it's all still there. Tucked into the folds of history like a forgotten note in a coat pocket. You might not always remember every campaign or every date, but you'll remember the day rabbits ran the world. And in that strange way of all good stories, it brings you comfort, a little silliness in a serious world. A reminder that even the greatest leaders can be undone by the unexpected, and that sometimes the fall is what makes the tale worth telling. So rest easy now. Let your breath slow, your limbs sink. The empire is safe, the rabbits are fed, the past is tucked in. And you're exactly where you're meant to be. Good night. Sweet dreams. End of script. Sweet dreams.